Derek's Encore.
Cool.
The stories behind the songs.
Thank you.
Here's iHeartRadio's Miles Galloway.
Don't count on me. In fact, no, do count on me, because I can give you the stories behind the songs you love. I'm Miles Galloway, and this is the story of Sum 41's Fat Lip. As I record this episode, Canadian pop-punk icons Sum 41 are embarking on their final world tour, releasing their final album and hanging up the Vans and studded belts forever. That's right, Ajax, Ontario's finest, are calling it quits. It might surprise you to hear that Sum 41 have been a staple of rock radio in this country for the better part of 25 years, and that even through lineup changes, health scares, label moves, and musical experimentation, Deryck Whibley and the boys have helped keep the spirit of pop-punk, heavy metal, and good old-fashioned Canadian rock and roll alive and kicking. The band were formed originally, but probably not too seriously, back in 1994 as Caspar by 14-year-old guitarist Deryck Whibley and his friend Grant McVitie. Then drummer Steve Jocks joined the group by 1996 and was followed soon by vocalist John Marshall and bassist Richard Roy. While continuing to try and find their sound and permanent band members, the band's name briefly changed to Supernova, before changing again on the 41st day of the gang's summer vacation to, you guessed it, Sum 41. I see what you did there, lads. During a recent interview with iHeartRadio's Jesse and JD, Deryck explained the motivation behind starting a band so young.
We started our band in 96 because we were huge fans of NoFX and Pennywise. Those are the two bands that we held as like, man, if we could just be as good as those two bands and play on the Warped Tour, that was our dream. So needless to say, we've exceeded all of our dreams. And
the band soon met Canadian music stalwart Greig Nori of the band Treble Charger, who agreed to manage them despite not really liking their music or Marshall's vocal stylings. Nori told Exclaim magazine in 2019, "I wasn't crazy about the songs they were writing, and the singer they had wasn't that great. Right away, I could see that this other kid, Deryck, could write songs. And they had this standout drummer and a kid that has early signs of writing catchy stuff. I thought, that's a flag." Nori convinced Whibley to take over on vocals, which ultimately meant there wasn't a place for Marshall in the band anymore. By 1997, McVitie had also left the group, and a slot in Sum 41 was opened for schoolmate Dave Brownsound Baksh on lead guitar, as Whibley took over rhythm duties. Just as the lineup changes looked to be complete, the band got into a near-fatal car accident, which led to Richard Roy leaving the group, and after a brief fill-in stint from session musician turned manager turned yoga instructor Mark Spikolik, Jason Cohn McCaslin finally settled in as the band's permanent bass player. I hope you remembered all of that information. There will be a quiz later. Throughout 1997, Sum 41 took time to establish themselves with their newly completed lineup to pay their dues and learn to navigate the Canadian music scene from not only Greig Nori, but Mark Costanzo of Len. Yes, that's famous one-hit wonder Steal My Sunshine Len and pre-Broken Social Scene fame Brendan Canning. In 1998, the guys recorded a demo tape affectionately known as the Rock Out With Your Cock Out tape, which they sent out to record labels to try and catch their attention. For the most part, it didn't work. The labels listened, but they weren't really sure what this band was trying to achieve, so they passed on Sum 41. Always the troublemakers, the guys also filmed their zany teenage angst, skateboarding, making movie parodies, and shooting people with super soakers, and soundtracking the footage with their music. They also sent that content to the labels in hopes of getting signed. Man, the 90s were a lot of work. These days, they probably just could have made a few TikToks. Whether it was the music, the skateboarding, or the super soakers, whatever the guys were doing was working, and Sum 41 were subject to a major bidding war between American record labels, which is a pretty impressive feat for a group of teenage Canadian punks. Sum 41 ultimately signed on the dotted line with the world-famous Island Records in 1999. Now, with the major music machine behind them in America, Sum 41 were finally ready to record a proper EP on Island subsidiary Big Rig Records. Released in the summer of 2000 and entitled Half Hour of Power, 2 videos were made for their first single, Makes No Difference. One using some of the aforementioned home footage that got them noticed to begin with, and another with the band playing a raucous house party. In that video, the late great rapper DMX shows up at the party, driving through the living room on an ATV. During their Half Hour of Power days, Sum 41 was creating a decent amount of buzz in America before they'd even made any waves here in their homeland. Appearing from time to time on MTV and touring the States relentlessly, including some dates on the ever-popular Warped Tour, the band fit the early 2000s skate punk aesthetic and sound to a T, but it just wasn't translating back home. Much Music, to their credit, were profiling the band quite a bit in the year 2000, but the band spoke candidly about the strange situation they found themselves in.
Success. What the hell happened? Going from Canada and then burning.
There's a bunch of ugly dorks from Canada really popular in America. I don't understand how it happened. Probably a lot of bribes and stuff like that.
Yeah. So what's it like? What are your lives like now? How do they change?
What is our live show like now?
No, your lives, like living.
Oh, our lives. Oh, we're never home. Yeah. I never had a life before, so it's nothing much has changed because I still don't have one. But I don't know. All we do is basically we live in a box and we drive around and play and get in adventures.
Damn, you're not totally exploiting the fact that you're mega popular in the States?
Maybe we're exploiting it a little bit, But aside from that,
what are the perks of being
boobies,
famously successful?
Boobies, a lot of boobies.
What, you get the chicks now?
You can get. Well, it's hard to believe, I know, but not really actually. But it's easier to get close. So. Yeah, I like to pretend. I like to go on TV and brag. I get laid all the time, Canada.
Luckily for the band, Island Records were playing the long game and had quite a bit of faith in Sum 41. Sum 41 were also playing the long game and were sitting on a few unreleased songs specifically not included on the EP. While on tour, Deryck and the band were burning the candle at both ends writing new songs for their upcoming album. They were working with famed punk rock music producer Jerry Finn, who'd worked with the likes of their heroes Green Day, Blink-182 and Pennywise. And they'd come up with a plan of attack for a quick follow-up record for the spring of 2001. Speaking with Less Than Jake frontman Krista Makes on his podcast, Krista Makes a Podcast, Whibley explained,
when we signed our record deal in 99, we had, I don't know how many songs were written, but there was Half Hour Power, which is only 6 songs, I think, really. I mean, I think there's 11 tracks, but some of it's instrumental stuff. And there were 6 songs, and I think I had about 4 more songs, which I know was In Too Deep, and maybe just a couple of them. A song called Motivation, Handle This, and a song called Rhythms that were all on All Killer. I had those pre-Half Hour Power, but we knew we were going to save that for All Killer. So Jerry came on board. He said, I'm going to make... We knew he was going to do All Killer. We were going to go do Half Hour Power on our own. And I was going to keep writing while I was on the road. And that's basically what happened. So the rest of All Killer started to come out while we were just touring around the U.S. And Canada in support of Half Hour Power.
Singles In Too Deep and Motivation were locked and loaded. Now classic songs in any respectable pop-punk fan's library, and the band and Jerry Finn completed the album. The label was happy. The album was done. Bust out the Super Soakers, call DMX, pop a bottle of Goldschlager, and let's party, right? Well, if you've been listening to Encore for a while now, first of all, thanks. You have exquisite taste in podcasts. But secondly, there seems to be an all too common thread when we talk about these massive hit singles that really puts artists on the map. And that thread is that there's always one more song. And for Sum 41, that song was about to storm into the party like its name was El Nino. That song was Fat Lip. One of the most enigmatic things about great pop music is that the journey to the final product that you and I hear on the radio and immediately fall in love with can actually be a long, non-linear, nonsensical journey full of throwaway bits and pieces in the songwriter's brain, of which in moments of clarity come together at just the right time. Deryck Whibley sat down with our team for Encore to tell us how Fat Lip was no exception to this phenomenon. It somehow existed both before and after All Killer No Filler was considered completed.
Yeah, well, Fat Lip is an interesting song because the origins of that song started way before it was actually finished. I've been toying with this idea of trying to mix old school rap, like Run DMC, Beastie Boys, like mid-'80s style rap with our version of pop punk that we were doing at the time, and pretty unsuccessfully for a couple of years. It just never seemed to come together. And I'd kind of let the idea go. And the first thing I wrote for the actual Fat Lip song that was on All Killer was the riff. And I didn't even know what I was writing. It was just a guitar riff. And that sat for 6 months. And then one day I was writing music and I came up with this verse that had a riff and I had some singing and I thought, well, I might be able to do some rapping over this. And then that sat for a couple months. And then another day I just wrote this chorus and I didn't think I was writing for the same song. None of these parts I thought were going to be Fat Lip. It wasn't until I realized that they actually were all around the same tempo. They were all kind of in the same key. And I just kind of pieced them all together and made a little demo and realized they actually all worked really well together. And that was the sort of basic structure. I mean, I had a riff, I had a verse, and I had a chorus, and then I repeated that on a demo, and I played it for a couple people, and people laughed at the rapping stuff, like in a good way. They thought, well, that was kind of clever, and that's kind of cool, and great how it goes into a punk rock fast part right after that, and then it explodes into a chorus. So then I just had to finish the rest of the song, which that took another 6 or 8 months. So all in all, the song Fat Lip took 1.5 years, but about 2 years of experimenting with this sound that I was calling punk hop at the time to even get to the point of putting Fat Lip together.
As Deryck explains, putting Fat Lip together was both a gift and a curse. The band, the label, and management knew it was the killer track for All Killer No Filler, but it also barely even felt like a Sum 41 song at all. By the time it was on the radio in April of 2001, the band hadn't even played the song live. Here's Deryck again.
We'd never played that song live until the song came out and was on the radio, and we were forced to play it live. And it was really difficult at first. I mean, it was to do all that. Since the song was pieced together in the studio with all the vocals and stuff like that, they were all done at separate times. To do that live, to go back and forth was really challenging on stage. And it didn't sound good for a long time. The first time that song ever actually sounded good was when we performed on SNL.
So, what makes this messy, difficult, Frankenstein's monster of a song special then? Perhaps it's the Beastie Boys inspired call and response rap rock with aggressive and playful vocals being shared between Deryck, Steve-O, and Brown Sound, assaulting your ears with braggadocious claims of misdemeanors and hijinks. Maybe it's the clear homage to the heavy metal stylings of the 1980s, with drop-tuned guitar riffs, direct call-outs to Iron Maiden, and Judas Priest hidden in a pop-punk song. Or maybe, most simply, it was a combination of all of the above, filtered uniquely through the lens of some snot-nosed punk kids who were really living this skate-fest, die-young lifestyle. Sum 41 weren't trying to be cool, they were just being themselves. Here's Deryck Whibley talking with Chris DeMakes again.
Especially in those days. Even though this song has somewhat of a theme through it, we never spoke about what should this song be about. It was just words that kind of came. The rap stuff was like, well, that's what's funny and what makes sense. And somebody had a line and that would sort of inform the next line. But we weren't talking about, let's write a song about us and our teenage life or anything. It was just whatever comes, you know.
In hindsight, it may not have been the healthiest of times for Sum 41. A 2001 profile of the band with Rolling Stone recounts tales of Whibley shooting out all the windows in a hotel room with a BB gun. In the same profile, it's noted that during MTV's Campus Invasion tour, an evening of drinking Jack Daniels with the band's Saliva degenerated into throwing bottles through hotel windows and slashing tires. Drummer Steve Jocks noted at the time that the band was becoming so notorious for self-destruction and reckless abandon that Island Def Jam president Lyle Cohen made them a bit of a devil's deal, saying, quote, "I want you to go out there and fuck shit up. I will pay for it," telling them to enjoy themselves. We'll pick up the trail of mayhem. Here's one condition. That mayhem had to be committed to videotape so it could be shared with the youth of North America, baby. Again, 2001 really could have benefited from TikTok. Speaking of mayhem committed to videotape, Sum 41 were already familiar with moderate airplay on MTV by the time the Fat Lip music video was released in the summer of 2001. But it was this chaotic video for their most identifiable song that shot them straight to the top of the charts on MTV's Total Request Live, and finally here at home on the Much Music Countdown. Directed by Mark Klasfeld, the video for Fat Lip was a self-deprecating production that stayed true to the high school dropout skater punk loser aesthetic that the lyrics of the song prescribed, and the lifestyle the guys in Sum 41 were living at the time. Klasfeld had also recently directed Nelly's Country Grammar music video, and the band was a big fan of the outdoor street party vibe of that piece. Fans of Pomona, California, a Sum 41 and pop-punk hotbed, were called upon to show up with some stuff and hang out for the shoot. The video infamously starts off with the guys freestyle rapping to hapless sales clerks at a California liquor store who look about half a second away from breaking down laughing at any moment, before transitioning to the iconic opening riff, a dude wrestling a goose, and an outdoor mosh pit thrash along. Speaking with Loudwire in 2020, Deryck Whibley noted that the many vignettes of punks of all ages sliding down hills in buckets, breakdancing, lounging on beat-up couches and cars, and of course, skateboarding with fireworks, were shot separately from the main performance portion of the video. So, much like with the creation of the song itself, the band didn't really know what to expect from the final product until they saw early cuts of the video. Needless to say, they liked what they saw. It cannot be understated how important a killer music video was in 2001. Like so much music at the time, Fat Lip the song and Fat Lip the video needed each other. If you look back at the charts, the album may not have been strong enough based on people who had simply just heard Sum 41's music, but just days after performing the song as part of a rock medley on MTV's 20th anniversary special with the likes of the legendary Rob Halford and Tommy Lee, people began to take notice and became hungrier to see the Fat Lip video as much as hear it. On August 4th, 2001, the album peaked at number 13 on the Billboard US Albums chart and stayed on that chart for a total of 49 weeks. As the lines began to blur between culture and counterculture in music, fashion, and really all of entertainment, fans wanted art that was gritty but polished, loud but catchy, angsty but fun. The video for Fat Lip and Sum 41 had all of that in spades. Here's Deryck talking about that critical moment in the band's existence with Krista Makes.
There was actually a moment where it almost just kind of stalled and the label was going to give up on it. But I remember thinking it started out well and it kind of went up the chart a little bit, but then it stalled and started to drop a bit. And there was a big discussion whether or not the label was going to put any more money into promotion and should we just cut our losses and go in too deep. And I remember we really, pushed them. We just said, we really, really want it to go. You have a band who's willing to work and do whatever we need to do. And they said, yeah, okay, let's do this. And they put more money into the promotion and kept us out on the road because they had to pay for us to be on the road in those days because we had, we weren't really anybody. So that did it did take off at that point. But there was a moment where it almost didn't work out.
The overwhelming success of Fat Lip on TV and radio pushed Sum 41's All Killer No Filler to platinum selling status by 2001. Right around the time Fat Lip went to number 1 on the Alternative Songs Billboard chart. MTV rewarded their favourite Canadian sons that year with a nomination for Best New Artist in a Video, but they lost out to Alicia Keys. Here at home, Sum 41 won the 2001 Much Music Video Awards for Favourite Canadian Group and Favourite Video by a Canadian. But the ceremony was cancelled as the world mourned the 9/11 terrorist attacks earlier in September. All Killer No Filler wasn't initially a critical success. Rolling Stone gave it a middling review, calling Sum 41, quote, "New millennium punk, slick, self-aware master entertainers in baggy shorts. Sum 41 are sharp musicians and have at least one version of the songcraft thing down, and their inability to stay away from old-school satanic metal is endearing. Call it ADD rock for the vaguely unsatisfied." All Music called it a bit derivative, while Terry Bazer of Drowned in Sound panned the record, saying that although Jerry Finn's production was its, quote, usual sky-high standard, there isn't a second's worth of originality on display. He did pay Fat Lip a compliment, albeit a backhanded one, noting its impressive hybrid of all things trendy in the current rock conglomerate. Quite possibly the most contagious chorus you will hear all year. But as time passed, history has been kind to All Killer and its lead single. It made Rock Sound's 51 most essential pop-punk albums of all time. BuzzFeed called it one of the 36 pop-punk albums you need to hear before you effing die. And publications like Stereogum, Vice, and Exclaim have done more fitting tributes to the band's early efforts in recent years. As this episode's being written, Deryck Whibley's just sat down with The Guardian to look back at Sum 41's rollercoaster career as it winds down. Their new album, Heaven X Hell, promises to bring the classic Sum 41 sound as well as explore the heavier metal influences that they've played with over the latter half of their existence. Perhaps his most memorable quote from the piece addresses the sort of pop-punk renaissance we find ourselves in 2024, with the likes of Whibley's ex-wife, Avril Lavigne, MGK, and Olivia Rodrigo paying clear tribute to 2000s pop-punk in their music. When pop-punk first exploded, it was looked down upon as a passing fad, paint-by-numbers nursery rhyme music. It took having some time away from it for people to see that there's a lot of creativity there. See, Sum 41 was telling you all along. It was all killer, no filler. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm off to wrestle a goose outside a liquor store. I'm Miles Galloway, and that was the story of Sum 41's Fat Lip. With new episodes of Encore out every Thursday.
Encore is an iHeartRadio Canada podcast. Subscribe to this podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. Download the iHeartRadio app for more great podcasts just like these.